All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here tonight. I want to get my thank yous covered quickly. I wanted to thank Stories on Stage for selecting my story, and to Elise and Naomi for their incredible feedback and guidance in the editing process. They were so wonderful, and I think they really helped to make this story awesome. I want to also thank my dear friend Jeannie for selling my zine tonight. And the Pence Gallery as well for hosting us. This is such a great space, and I'm loving all the Under the Sea theme tonight. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about this story. This story came together in a workshop with the great writer Yin Lee, who has been teaching fiction at Davis and will sadly be leaving us. I'm very sad about this. The story itself was kind of a response to a story by George Saunders, who is one of my favorite writers, but who wrote a very unfortunate story called The Supplica Girl Diaries, which I know a lot of people love, but which I have some serious issues with. And so I kind of wrote the story as a response to it, and then it got stranger and stranger the more I went in. While I was writing it, I was thinking a lot about where we're at in our political moment right now, and the complicity of my demographic, white women, in getting us here. And so I was thinking about the kind of white women that who got us here, and she's kind of the protagonist of this story. I did end up finding some common ground and some sympathy with her, though you may not. She's not very likable. But to prepare for this story, I watched a ton of interviews with Ivanka Trump, because I think she's fascinating. And I also watched a lot of commercials for Jared Jewelry. So I think you'll probably pick up on some of that language and that imagery. So what else can I tell you? So I want to talk a little bit about my zine, and then we'll get to the story. So the zine that I have for sale tonight, I think I only have 2 copies left, but it's something that you can look for on the internet and order from me later on if there's no copies left tonight. It's a project I'm really proud of and excited about. Right after the election, my friend Leslie and I decided that we wanted to work on a project together, and Leslie is a printmaker, and we decided that we were going to make an artist book, and it was going to be political. And we ended up soliciting writing and artwork from all of our most talented artist and writer friends, and we had them all write on the topic of reproductive rights and their relationship to their bodies. And so there's some really powerful writing in there. There's writing about living with ovarian cysts. There's writing about trying to get birth control and being unable to. There's writing about abortions and pregnancies and unplanned pregnancies. There's writing about mythical lady creatures. There's all kinds of stuff. And it's really beautiful, and I'm really proud of it. So if you have a chance, please take a look. That would make me really happy. Without further ado, I want to thank Kristi for reading my story tonight and welcome her to the stage.
Good evening, everyone. This is The Conception. Lisa Marie Lisa Marie Matovosian invited me over for tea in the garden. Her cherry tree was in bloom 3 months early, but that wasn't the half of it. You could see the tire tracks where they'd carted in piece after piece of the garden's new centerpiece. As we dog-legged the mansion corner, she clutched my arm. The faint scent of beer wafted from her glossy head. I can't wait for you to see it. You'd be stunned. You'll be gobsmacked. Honestly, it arrived last Monday, and I still have a hard time believing it's here. How impressive could it be, I thought, if you couldn't even see it from the street? I'd heard the ruckus of last week's assembly crew with their beeping trucks and whirling drills. I'd watched the commercials. They looked manufactured, each exactly like the other. I couldn't understand how they inspired veneration. The structures were foreign-made, with no insulation to speak of, and a sheen that somehow clashed with every color of the house. Oh, but the reveal. 35 or 40 feet high, the silo rose smoothly from the lawn as if fitted to a secret subterranean chamber, the earth's own bullet. The structure was the precise height of the house and perhaps 20 feet in diameter. As I looked up the sheer face, my lungs convulsed and my knees buckled. There were no visible seams, but I spotted a black square near the top that could have been a window. Intensities of rainbows raced across the silver surface, peacocking the Matavosians' young love. I despised them both, but I couldn't deny the silo was a monument in its own right. "What do you think?" Lisa Marie asked. "Would you like to see inside?" She took the swipe card from around her neck and lay it flat against a slight indentation on the silo's side, summoned a door. "Oh, Lisa, it's beautiful." "Do you really think so? I was nervous to show you. You have such particular tastes." "Do I? I always thought of it as refinement." "I love it, though. Really, I do. That sheen. I could imagine it sitting there just the same on the moon or under the sea, and you riding around on a giant seahorse. And goodness, what I wouldn't give for a space that's completely mine. It's so new, so fantastically new. I wonder, though, are those stairs really up to code?" "Well, of course they are. It's an original. They mailed us the certificate of authenticity." "Oh, I didn't mean to imply. It's your property after all, and you shouldn't have to worry about accessibility. It's, well, not silly. Nothing you could do could ever be silly, but it's strange, isn't it? To think that you'll be spending your days inside that? Tell me about life in the silo. Those hours of waiting and waiting. How do you keep busy? Twiddling your, well, you know. You always had adorable hobbies." Lisa Marie took a step back through the doorway and stood in half shadow with arms crossed. The slight exhalations of the silo's patented ventilation system toyed with her curls. "I have a lot of time to mull over statements like that." I wanted to slap her, to tear out by the root handfuls of that stinking hair, but instead, I smiled. After the Matavosians, I took my time in admitting that I wanted a silo of my own. I scoffed at the commercial if it came on at the bar, and when Raj's boss bought one for his wife, I remarked that it was totally redundant since she was already trapped in the empty silo of her own pampered head. Secretly, though, I desired the silo's solemnity, its mysterious patina. I found myself flipping channels hoping to catch the commercial. I recoiled from the small intrusions into my personal space on the subway, at the grocery store. On a solitary walk one warm evening, I saw a man coming down the sidewalk towards me, clutching a bulky paper bag to his chest. The sidewalk was narrow and there was no planting strip to step onto, and he came very close to touching me as he passed. His unshaven face was smudged. He smelled of burning rubber, and when I released my breath, he turned back, bag cringling oddly. He asked me for a cigarette, and though I answered no, I felt his eyes following me as I crossed to my side of the street. I looped around the block twice before I felt sure that he'd gone and it was safe to claim my front door. After that, I had trouble sleeping in our bed, and I insisted that Raj accompany me everywhere. Only the silo's bulk could reassure me. It didn't hurt that a silo 50 feet high would cast its shadow across the Matavosians' yard at sunset, when the two of them liked to spoon in their hammock. Raj knew my mind, because he is the best husband a girl could imagine. On March 9th, our 5th anniversary, he presented me with a small velvet box. I held it in my hands and tried to absorb the surprise. The robotic crane and small crew of workmen in orange jumpsuits had already tipped me off that today was the day, but it was sweet of Raj to persist in the reenactment. It was our favorite part of the commercial, the close-up of the wife's beatified face as she opens the box to her gleaming swipe card, the rhinestone lanyard coiled beneath. We would rewind over and over while the box swung open and shut and the slow rotation of her hand ushered in love. "I'm crazy about you, Val," Raj said all in one breath. I replied, "I'm crazy about you, Raj," blowing into his ear. I permitted him to loop the lanyard over my ears and neck and snuggle the card in my décolleté. We sat in the porch chairs with our coffee and held hands as we watched the men haul segment after segment out of boxes, snap in attachments and tighten bolts. The crane came to life and lifted the nippled roof into position. The workers were fitting the heavy double-bolted door to the gap at the base when the foreman came over to us with a clipboard. He didn't meet my eyes, which I appreciated. The foreman pointed where Raj and I should sign, and he pronounced liability exemption as liability exnem. "May your space be filled with love," he said, and saluted. Raj returned the gesture. His honest face radiated belief that it would be. Still, I had detected something in the foreman's tone I could only describe as derision. I mentioned for Raj to stay behind in his chair. I wanted to see the silo for myself. The approach to the door rekindled in me a shadow of the yowling need I'd felt at the Matavosians. When I placed my card in the indentation, a pressurized gust blew my bangs back. I stood at the threshold and gazed into darkness. The silo was mostly empty. The walls didn't seem as thick as advertised, and instead of installing a foundation, they'd left the base open to the grass. I climbed the stairs carefully, detecting a slight wobble in each as my foot pushed off. We'd had to sacrifice interior detail to make up for the cost of the extra height, but once I have my revenge in my head, I do not relent. The silo was mine. All of it. Even, or especially the air. The factory calibrated everything. Temperature, airflow, particulate levels, layout, even the furniture and slant of light were all arranged with comfort and receptivity in mind, which, scientifically speaking, should produce optimum fertility in the occupant. Though the complete details of its layout were available in the promotional materials, I felt that my silo, and myself in it, held the shining, slippery promise of undiscovered country, dense jungle, dark sea. At the top was the circular room where I would live, beneath the metal dome. The decor was distinctly retrofuturist, with bubbled plastic coverings over the modular cabinets and shelves, colored harvest orange and mint, though I'd requested eggshell. I'd have to repaint everything. I couldn't find the bed until I spotted a stainless steel handle on the fair wall. When I yanked it, a circular Murphy bed unfolded creakily. I tested the mattress and felt slats through the padding. Somehow the room already smelled of mildew, or perhaps it was the odor of whatever chemicals were being pumped into the vents and exuding from the walls. Still, it was a gift from the heart. And it really only mattered what the silo looked like from the outside, seeing as Raj would be my only visitor and he was colorblind. I took a moment coming back down the stairs to compose myself. Raj was surely anticipating a specific kind of delight, certainly not the wild explorer's gleam in my eye. I realized that I had no memory of what the woman in the commercial said after she'd received her gift. Maybe she never spoke at all. I decided silence was the most effective strategy in this case. I did not trust myself to speak without some hint of my usual disdain, and when I reappeared in the doorway, I arranged my face and opened my arms. Raj came to me as if transfixed. and we kissed right there, half in and half out of the light. Raj had moved most of my things to the garage the night before, so he didn't have to carry each suitcase quite so far. Soon enough, he had my room well appointed, and it was time for us to make use of the uncomfortable Murphy bed. Raj wrapped his appendages around me in customary fashion, but gave a much heartier effort. He must have been unusually excited. After some struggle, he maneuvered me into a starfish configuration facing the foot of the bed, thrusting from behind so that I could see my surroundings unobstructed. I was pleased that he could be so absorbed in his lovemaking. It both proved to me his commitment to this new phase in our married life and allowed me to plan the transposition of my existence in this room. There was the countertop, where I'd install a hot plate and electric tea kettle, the wall socket, most agreeably suited for my reading lamp, the ceiling hook where I could hang plants. There was a single thick-paned and possibly narrow window, just wide enough for my head to lean against. The arrow slit through which I would see the world, but it would not see me. "Oh, yeah, babe, we'll make such a quality baby," Raj growled. I didn't know anyone personally who'd gotten pregnant in their silo, and despite what the ad said, it did not seem to me to be totally the point. If the structure could be said to have any point besides that which its occupant gave. The ads close with a monologue from a man in a sharply pressed, old-fashioned suit. His black hair frozen in a wave, his mustache an ink stroke. "Listen, darling, jewelry won't save your love. Jewelry can be tossed away, broken, melted down for scrap. Love is the spark that starts a family, and that spark needs a place to catch light. An airy space, closer to dreams than boring old humdrum reality, where two can easily become 3, or 4, or 5, or 6, the man winked. Don't you long for something upright, firm, embracing, unencumbered by routine? We all do. Peace of mind, peace of heart, a space to fill with love. Silo. The ads never mentioned sex or went into detail about the silo's procreant qualities, but the shape of it made the expectation obvious, and why would a couple go through the ostentatious ritual for any reason but desperation, not to be stuck with only each other for the rest of their natural lives? Raj yodeled his delight, and I panted to keep the tempo up. I was enjoying myself because he was enjoying himself. It was wonderful how profoundly I could affect this man. The first month in the silo passed slowly. I tried to take up various hobbies, needlepoint, bread making, yoga, but discarded each when I couldn't master it immediately. I read everything in our collection of flimsy romances and thrillers, then read them again, red pen in hand, correcting all the misspellings and clumsy language, forecasting doom for every couple to capture for every spy. On the day my parents would descend for Sunday dinner, I woke before sunrise and sat staring into the belly of a cloud near the edge of the horizon. When the cloud had a soft, lacy edge to it that turned to filigree as the light rose, but the sun could not seem to penetrate the pulsing blueness at its heart. I squinted, trying to come up with a precise name for the shade. But the cloud was suddenly gone, not a trace to be seen. Simply the featureless powder blue that faded to white as it approached the sun. I turned my gaze to another cloud, a small popcorn in the upper left quadrant. But a shiver ran through me, and I was compelled to look away before whatever might happen happened. There were certain inconveniences about my current living situation that I did my best to overlook. The silo's form was imposing, but unlike the Matavosian's luxury model, its insides left much to be desired. There was no plumbing. I used a composting toilet in a curtained-off area in the silo's belly, and Raj carted in gallons of purified water each morning that I boiled for my bath. The steam had encouraged mildew, which was creeping slowly across the countertop. There was no heat, except what little emanated from an old radiator Raj had hauled up and wired through the wall to the garage. I couldn't exactly ask Raj for an upgrade. He was already working weekends to cover the payments, and I could not allow some minor discomforts to overpower my gratitude. I certainly wouldn't say anything about the butterfly shrubs in our garden below, which, without my constant pruning, had begun to wilt and brown. At least the smell bothered me less and less each day. But even so, there were mornings when I wake up and thought of only death and the things decaying in the ground beneath me. My mother called on Sunday morning to check on provisions and ask leading questions about my father. "Does Poppy know he's driven you to this extreme?" While in the background, Poppy complained that he'd missed the game. For some reason, my parents brought along their priest, a Jesuit named Padre, or no, I have it wrong, his name was Pedro, but they called him Padre. All through the meal, Poppy could not stop himself from periodically shouting, "Wonder how the boys are doing right about now," into my mother's hearing aid. I was impatient to get through dessert and coffee and head back out to the yard where Raj and I had laid the flagstones for a small footpath to the silo door. "It's only been a month, Valley. You shouldn't worry." 6 weeks, actually, and I wasn't worrying. Because often it doesn't take right away for many women. Many women. I used to see them at the clinic all the time, and it was always because they weren't eating well or taking prenatal vitamins or were sleeping close to the hairdryer or silly things. Padre Pedro, perhaps greedy for a fresh baptism, couldn't help but add his own dollop of celibate wisdom. It is suggested in the case of infertility that the female relatives of the lady in question bathe themselves in rainwater and pray a rosary twice daily, in addition to lighting a candle apiece for St. Christopher and the Virgin. "This may be a bit modern for you, Padre," Raj interrupted, a shred of filet mignon clinging to his lip, "but it's scientifically proven. The data is comprehensive on this. The results have been replicated by successive double-blind studies. There's tangible proof that the silos stimulate the psychobiological drive to procreate, evidence we mortals can behold." "It's a mesmerizing thing," the Padre agreed. Soon enough, the party stood at the silo's base, swirling glasses of the blackest digestif that was no less vile for being consecrated by the Padre himself. Raj solemnly hoisted the American, Californian, state, and Gadsden flags, while Poppy hummed taps. "Oh, your poor flowers," Mother explained. "You've stolen their sun." "That's right, Hilda. Val gets all the light now," Raj countered, rather more sharply than was necessary. "I need another of these foul things," said my mother as she waggled her empty glass, an excuse to take me around to the other side of the silo where she could subject me to her projectile whisperings. "I see your game, Missy. You brought us here for another loan. We both know Raj can't afford this. He's just a junior executive. This is bigger than Dr. Schrabe's, and I have seen this Christmas bonus. Christ's sakes, Valley, I don't know why the two of you can't stick to a reasonable budget or learn to conceive for free like every human before you." "A Poppy won't be happy about this. No, he will not. We were planning on going to Florida this summer." "Can't you spend time with your family without suspecting them of panhandling? I don't need a loan. Raj worked it all out. I think he's got a subsidy, and the payments are all tax deductible. You don't need to pay up front. There's a monthly charge while you're using it, and then you pay interest. Trust me, it'll be fine." She huffed, but I saw her trail her finger across the silo's sleek body. It was mid-May, and my womb remained barren. My mother sent a brunch invitation. I was perniciously bored, so I accepted. Raj granted his approval, I think to give himself a morning where he didn't have to rise at 6 to haul my bathwater. Because we were still within the 3-month probationary period, I was permitted to leave unaccompanied for 3 hours at a time. I met my mother at a French cafe with overpriced croissants. Re-entering society felt like time travel, like remembering my ancestors had breathed underwater. My mother had a sheaf of documents in front of her. She changed her hair. As she flipped through them, I saw that many were stamped with the Silo logo, a ring encircling a heart. We're thinking about it, she said. You're too old, I replied, and besides, Poppy will burn down the house if you aren't there to shut off the burners after him. There's a retirement version coming, a second honeymoon, they're saying. It's like yours, only instead of the fertility chemicals, they pipe in something that's supposed to rekindle lost passions. But it's not about me, not yet anyway. How do you like yours? Raj comes every day, morning and night. I feel really valued. I'm always calm knowing he's down there guarding me with his life. It's freeing. What about another little life? Will I have a grandchild soon? I won't be around forever, you know. And neither will Raj's savings account. I hope you've seen the penalties they charge for extended use. They're not small, only 6 months before they start hiking the rate. How could anyone make a child on a deadline? Raj mentioned something about that when we signed the lease, but I decided that such grubbing details were beneath my concern, like the squirrels that scrabbled in the weeds, that they now grew thickly beneath my tower window. As for the grandchild, I stared pointedly at the crucifix, drowned in my mother's cleavage, and said that we'd just have to leave it up to science. Once home, Raj and I decided that I should no longer receive visitors and that my time outside the silo would be limited to emergency and necessity only. Raj rigged up a clothesline pulley between my window and the garage to send up meals and other deliveries without disturbing me. I was pleased. I wore my swipe card around my neck but had no cause to use it. I had arranged the space exactly as I had wanted it, having repainted everything in a soft shade of lilac. I acquired enough perfumed candles to mask, if not eradicate, the smell. I didn't like the thought of intruders whose presence could only lead to my own eventual invasion and displacement. All shades of the final intruder, the baby, the reason I had my silo in the first place, and the reason that I would have to leave it and return to Raj in his uninteresting house below. As I sat at the window, thinking of the nothingness inside me, Norvin Matavosian was out jogging. This had become a frequent occurrence in the neighborhood. He was often shirtless and wore very small shorts and tall red socks with silver running shoes. Why wasn't he guarding Lisa Marie, I wondered. I imagined her sitting alone in her silo window, braiding and unbraiding hanks of that unbelievable black hair. If she were pregnant, I would have heard about it from my mother's weekly phone call, if not the community board newsletter. Lisa could never resist any opportunity to brag in print. Norvin had a broad chest, thickly furled and long, muscled legs, nothing like Raj's rugby legs. He struck me as the sort of man who'd make love for hours, never tiring, assembling his and Lisa Marie's bodies in creative new contortions and never retiring before she was satisfied. Lisa Marie had met him on an airplane. It was disgusting. And before the flight touched down, they decided to share a hotel room in the city where they were both attending an oral surgery conference. I watched the long muscles in his back ripple like a sea fan, and the soles of his shoes bite the asphalt. He covered incredible ground and hardly seemed to sweat. Late in the afternoon, I yelled down and asked Raj to send me the telephone. He was reluctant. A recent study published showed that there was a probable connection between cell signals and increased risk of uterine fibroids. But eventually he conceded, provided that I keep the call to 5 minutes or less. It came up, the string, in a small woven basket I'd never seen before. I had been avoiding the window since that morning's Norvin sighting, which had left me feeling flushed and queasy. As I reeled the basket in, I kept my eyes cast down. Hello, Norvin? This is Val. Raj Sanjangelo's wife? I wondered if I could speak with Lisa Marie. Hello, Valerie, Norvin purred. You should know that Lisa has entered into full crenellation. Isn't that wonderful? I mumbled. That level of isolation was only recommended for the 3 weeks immediately following conception, after which the mother-to-be was considered stable enough to return to Earth. I hadn't heard. She doesn't take calls, of course, or make them. We wanted to wait until she left the tower before we spread the good news. Yes, of course. It's only that she lent me a book a few months ago, and I know that she'd like it back. Would you be able to come and pick it up? I'm still permitted the occasional visitor. You could drop by on your run tomorrow morning. I'm usually up early. I can give you my congratulations in person. There was a silence on the line for a minute while Norvin considered my proposal, perhaps noting that I'd taken note of his routine. That would be fine, he replied. Have a nice night, Valerie. Yes, you as well, I said and hung up. I lowered the phone down through the window in the little basket for Raj to collect. But just as I released it, I heard Raj knocking on my silo door. I was slow to extract the swipe card from my shirt. Its lanyard seemed to catch in my hair and under my ears. When it came time to drop the card out the window for him to collect, I lost my grip and flung it out, away from the tower, where it crashed into the butterfly bushes. Sorry, babe, I shouted down. I'm such a klutz. Raj let out an exasperated sigh and went rummaging. I scrambled to change into his favorite lingerie, wrapping myself in the white silk robe. I shoved the pile of dirty pajamas into a cabinet and shook the crumbs from my coverlet. I lit the 5 candles at their stations around the room, and I was ready. Raj entered the round room, panting slightly. He shrugged off his coat and let it fall to the ground. What a day, he moaned. Poor thing, I simpered. Come here and let me make it better. What's a gal like you doing in a place like this? He asked. He always wore suits now, and I was always in lingerie or some other froth. He kissed me and smelled the same, a mixture of sweat and Old Spice that I usually found intoxicating. Today, though, the reek of mildew overwhelmed everything. The candles guttered, went out. I burrowed in against his chest, trying and catch more of his scent, but only sneezed across his shirt pocket. Oh, babe, cover your mouth. My husband dabbed at the spray and then gave up the unbuttoned shirt, loosened the tie, and soon stood before me in his boxers. I'm crazy about you, Val, he growled. I'm crazy. I started, and then faltered as the now dead butterfly bushes appeared before me in a ghastly vision. I'm crazy. You all right, babe? He took me in his arms. If you aren't going to do it, then why don't you just hire someone? What? The gardening. It's a mess, and did you notice it stinks in here? We need staff. His hand froze at my waist, where they had been attempting to unknot the silken tie. You know that we don't have time to spare right now. The silo entrance gets more brutal every month. I'm trying. Not hard enough, he joked, placing my hand on his boxers where I could feel it. I knew he wanted me to kneel down. I stayed standing. Tell me I'm the only one. You're the only one, Val, he said in one breath. Are you feeling extra fertile today? Don't you want out of this dump? I nodded, mechanically peering into his face. There was something unnerving in it, some change I couldn't name. Perhaps he'd simply parted his hair differently or plucked his eyebrows, or maybe he was wearing a layer of too light foundation. I only knew that he didn't look exactly like my husband, or like anyone's. I could see the bright flags of our ritual laid out before us, what he'd say and what I'd say, and when I'd finally let the robe drop, how long he'd bury his head between my legs, and when he'd look up and wait for me to pull him in. I knew I'd mule and whisper commands that didn't sound like anything I'd say clothed, and he'd slobber into my neck while I patted his head and called him a good boy. At first, the silo had given us the thrill of the new. The unmarked space where we could slough ourselves off and start over. But instead of fostering all that could blossom between us, it had just become another dull possession. The kind of thing we'd rattle to ward off evil spirits. Now I even knew the exact words I'd use, as if someone had handed me a script. Raj made the next move, a slow stroke through the silk from shoulder to hip. My line was, "Oh, where'd you learn to do that?" I could see that the silo was a failure. Raj was calcified, hopeless. I wondered if Lisa Marie felt this. If Norvin's exertions ever appeared as sadly predictable. I wished I could call her, but duty had cut the line, and only she could know how detestable it was to be loved by someone you understood so completely. After the baby came, she would forget. My father had never bothered to understand my mother, and she regarded him as a lap-trained pet. And that was why they were still married. I was getting screwed in a plywood playhouse. I was opening the box that contained the swipe card. I was laughing open-mouthed at the book club while the neighborhood gossip told us that Lisa Marie washed her hair in beer, and that was why it was so shiny. I was buying brass cutlery and pillowcases patterned with violets because I knew my mother would hate them. I was saying, I do, under a fluttering canopy while Raj's stepmother sucked down the gaggle of Sutter Home miniatures stashed in her purse. I was in a beach hut in Cancun after graduation, removing my shirt while Raj murmured along with the surf. A creature of love, he called me. I was being kissed for the first time in Raj's genetic lab near the eye wash station on the night before the winter final. In every memory, there was this man beside or before or behind me, steadfast. He provided my needs, catered to my whims. He constructed an enclosure and herded me in, and he would not let me out until I gave him the reward that was his due. I felt sorry for what he had to do to me. It was completely inadequate. For him, for me, for anyone. What I wanted, which he could never give me and I could never ask for, was to love the unknowable. The silo had seemed to be that, but like me, it was nothing but a receptacle for someone else's sameness. This time, Raj laid me backwards across the bed so that my head hung upside down. He settled my heels on each shoulder. I flung out my arms to steady myself at the first thrust. From this position, I could see a strange black patch beneath my chair by the window. The growth seemed to pulse and spread in rhythm with us. I squinted and distinguished individual stems or threads extending upwards, tipped with greenish bulbs. I knew what they were, the source of the smell. I focused on one bulb, well positioned to catch the breeze through the open window. In the morning, Norvin would come to release me one way or another. I closed my eyes, and when I opened them, the bulb burst apart, and the spores suffused us.